6 agendas. There is two presentation section, and question will be follow after the presentation, and where the attendees can either type it in the Zoom chat box for all of you, and also if you wish present the question by yourself, you can also click the raise hand feature, and then I will mute your audio, also turning your video on, if you wish. And I will remind you to fill in the present on the link provided in the chat box. Yep. I think without further ado, Dr. Brock, as our first speaker, will presentation with the title Understanding Influencing Human Behavior in Conservation. But before that, I would like to read and introduce to you who is Dr. Brock. I got the information from the internet. So, Doctor, please correct me if I'm wrong. Well, Dr. Brock is researcher from James Cook University. He's always been active by both the natural world and human behavior. This grounding shaped his research interest with focus on increasing and the effectiveness of conservation practice and understanding the behavior of research users. So, Dr. Brock, it's our pleasure to welcome you to give presentation, maybe 20 minutes. Dr. Brock, time is yours.
Yeah, thanks very much. And you got that pretty much straight on. So I'm going to share my screen and we can get started. So you can see it, I hope.
Yeah, I see.
All right, so basically the premise of my talk today, which I thought was 30 or 40 minutes long, so I'll scoot through it quickly, is how we understand and influence fisher behavior in marine protected areas. As I was saying earlier, I started out in biology and ecology, and the more time that I studied these different disciplines, the more apparent it became to me about the need to really get into the human behavior side of things if we want to make some tangible outcomes in conservation. So that's kind of driven me to where I am today and what I'm going to present to you. So there's really three messages that I want you to take home from this talk today. The first is that human behavior underpins all conservation and especially protected area management. The importance of multi and interdisciplinarity when it comes to our approaches that we study human behavior with. And third, the idea that we can really kind of leverage people's innate evolutionary wiring to achieve conservation success. So no-take marine protected areas, in case anyone here isn't familiar, success relies on many things, whether it's location, size, the list goes on. But in my biased account, I believe that it's really about our ability to manage humans. In other words, to gain people's compliance with no-take regulations. So notice here that I am focusing specifically on no-take marine protected areas rather than limited take. This brings us to the issue of paper parks. So most MPAs exist only on paper, but not in reality, and they often suffer high levels of poaching with little management or enforcement capacity. So I would argue that conservation can only be attained by changing human behavior. So the success or failure of these MPAs relies on compliance and influencing behavior. But studying compliance really is not easy. Imagine asking people these types of questions. Do you drink and drive? Do you smoke marijuana? Do you cheat on your partner? All of these things are really, really socially undesirable. Nobody wants to admit to them and nobody wants to speak about them. So the issue is, how do we actually get information on these issues and then ask them why and try to figure out why or what's driving these behaviors. So when it comes to thinking of these illegal fishing behaviors, you can kind of think about how we understand it. And there's a comprehensive approach that looks at the 5 W's, the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why. And I have the why here in bold because that's what I spend a lot of my time looking at and trying to understand so we can inform future conservation outcomes. So if this is all familiar to you, I apologize, but I'm going to quickly give a broad overview of some of the social science that sits behind enforcement or dealing with illegal fishing and studying it in marine protected areas and fisheries more generally. You kind of have 2 approaches. The first is this idea of a place-based approach, and that examines the environment where crime takes place. Is the MPA in question located out of eyesight at a village, or is it right next to the village? Do they have enforcement? Do they not? What are the types of weather that make it accessible or not. And then you have on the other end this idea of the actor-based approach, and that's really looking at people's motivations or their behavioral drivers that underlie the behavior itself. And in my opinion, kind of getting to the middle and using both of those approaches to understand behavior gives us a more thorough understanding of these drivers. So if you think about it, you have compliance, and I often think about compliance kind of as an outcome. So you have drivers or behavioral drivers or perceptions that influence compliance. But compliance really sits in the middle, and it's an antecedent or a precedent for conservation success. And it gets interesting when you start thinking about philosophically, how are you studying it? And oftentimes you can actually have it to where it feeds back into the actual drivers. So the main takeaway here is the idea that is quite dynamic rather than static in nature. So what influences compliance? There's a few different emerging themes and research frontiers. One of those is inclusion and access, whether it's looking at co-management, equity and justice, or stewardship behaviors. And then there's also the idea of looking at behavior and getting from understanding behavior to actually influencing behavior and getting people to move the direction that we want. So when it comes to compliance behavior, as I said, when you break down the understanding aspects of it, you could be looking at things like perceptions and processes, whether they're social or cultural or individual. And secondly, you could be looking at how we influence compliance. And that's looking at things like cognitive bias or social norms or concepts of persuasive communication. So I'm going to briefly touch on a few of these and then tell you a little bit about my research. So over the years, we've kind of gone from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen. First, we thought that people were rational actors. And then we decided, okay, well, maybe they're not quite as rational as we thought. They're not just only measuring costs and benefits. There's other things happening inside or outside that influence them. So then you look on the right side here of there's an individual, they've got all sorts of things going on in their head, and then that's influenced by things around them. And then secondly, you have the individual perceptions or processes. And this is a diagram here that shows the idea of slow and fast thinking systems in the brain that Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky really put out in their seminal research to show how sometimes we'll either make snap decisions and very quickly make decisions, other times, and that's type 1. Other times we'll sit and we'll mull on a behavior and think about it and make a decision using our reason or our ration, and that's type 2. So the point here is that influencing behaviors may rely on influencing one system rather than the other, or potentially both. And then when you look at these socio-cultural processes that exist, you have ideas of social learning theory, which looks at the environmental factors, behavioral factors, and the personal factors, and encompasses all of those into an individual. Or you have tools like social network and social network analysis on the right side here, where we look at how someone's positioning inside a network influences the information they get, the values they hold, and ultimately their behavior. So it brings me to 3 critical knowledge gaps that I want to speak about today. The first being how we assess and how we understand drivers of poaching. The third, which is out of order, which is about influencing compliance and reporting behaviors. And the second, which is about engaging resource users in surveillance and enforcement. So I'll cover a little bit about these 3 topics today. So numerous disciplines have been used to explore the why of poaching. You have traditional approaches, which are like your rational choice, which I alluded to earlier. We measure the costs and benefits. Then you have approaches like the normative approach, which is looking at how we are influenced by people around us or social norms. And then thirdly, you have this institutional approach, which really comes from Elinor Ostrom's seminal work to look at why we don't always have tragedies of the commons and why people come together to cooperatively actually manage their resources. And finally, you have all these other kind of disciplines that sit on the fringe and inform or influence some of these places. But again, when you meet in the middle, I think you get a more measured or a more holistic picture of why poaching is occurring, which leads to a better ability to manage it. So with rational choice, it's really coming from microeconomic models of behavior. And it's the foundation of deterrence theory and criminology that was first introduced in 1968. And basically, there's two ways to influence behavior, either with penalties or rewards. And this provides a really good background when poaching is financially motivated, but it doesn't really consider the moral or the social obligations. And it can actually lead to perverse outcomes where sanctions can increase crime, such as in defiance theory, where people are actually poaching or fishing illegally because they don't agree with the legitimacy of either the rules or the enforcement or management agency. But I want to leave you with the idea that, Daniel Kahneman told us people's beliefs, wishes, and hopes are not always anchored in reason. Then when you have this normative field of thought or discipline, you have perceived standards of behavior, which can include social and personal norms. And then you have the theory of planned behavior, which is one of the most widely cited theories that's used in social psychology to examine norms among other drivers of behaviors and to actually predict compliance behaviors. So you have your behavior on the right, you have your intention, in this case, to poach or fish illegally. And then you have your subjective norms or how society views poaching. You have attitudes or somebody's personal view about poaching or management. And then finally, you have this idea of perceived control or how easy someone thinks it may be to get away with this behavior. And in this case, the focus is on your individual or at the micro scale, but it generally doesn't address your macro level influences. So the third thing I want to talk to you about today is institutional. And this is based on Elinor Ostrom's work, where people's behavior is really influenced by the formal and informal rules that govern interactions. So these could either be a management agency, would be an institution, but social norms to some extent could also be considered an institution. So you have your behavior here again, and then you have things like user characteristics. How avid of a fisher they are. Are they out every day? Or are they out once a year? How engaged are they? Are they involved in collective decision-making or not? How important is fishing to them? The most important or the least? And then finally, you have like characteristics of the governance system. And these are looking at things like operational rules. Do they exist? Do they not? Collective choice rules where everyone's coming together and setting rules, or are they just being handed down from on high? Or something like graduated sanctions, which are sanctions that increase in both the harshness and the regularity as the crime increases, either in the regularity or in the severity of the crime itself. But one of the issues here is with traditional institutional approaches, we assume that actors are rational and don't necessarily integrate people's attitudes, beliefs, or values. So towards a framework that I'm interested in is looking at how we grab all these different things and start predicting compliance behavior. So the first gap here is that we just don't understand drivers of poaching, and few studies have really explored these drivers in marine protected areas. And of those that do, we often suffer from disciplinary silo thinking, where each discipline has its own language, its own scale, and its own way of examining the issue. So it led to the general research question of what drives people's poaching decisions. Secondly is when we start looking at solving this paper park problem, we know that many of the world's marine protected areas lack critical enforcement capacity. And one solution has been to engage latent surveillance and enforcement capacity of resource users. But this has very potentially serious consequences. So when you look, you see that over 4 people are killed every day defending the land or environmental rights. And so the point I want to make here is that institutions may be useful for responsibly engaging resource users, because we know that there is an increasing number of attempts to bolster compliance by harnessing the latent capacity of resource users. But again, there's a paucity of research on how fishers may respond when they observe poaching and what role those institutions may play. Now, the third thing I want to briefly touch on is about influencing compliance and reporting behaviors. And this builds on this last gap that I was just speaking about. And behavioral interventions themselves are increasingly advocated as solutions to illegal fishing, but they're rarely applied or especially empirically assessed in real world settings. So to get a little bit into that first gap of understanding behavioral drivers, a previous study, I wanted to know what fishers' perceptions of poaching can tell us about the culture of compliance. And so to do this, I was here in Australia working with recreational fishers on the Great Barrier Reef in the marine park. And we did roughly 700 surveys at boat ramps over a period of 18 months. And we had 29 theoretically based predictors of poaching, whether they were normative perceptions, attitude toward the management. Remember that framework that I had, that's what we started digging into. And we had everything quantified on a scale of 1 to 7, whether somebody strongly agreed or disagreed. So first we had this subset of perceptions, which are all coming out of the theory of planned behavior. Secondly, we built out the normative aspects of things a little bit more to look at the perceived behaviors of others, as well as personal norms, which aren't typically covered under the original theory of planned behavior. And third, we had some of these institutional characteristics. So the last thing I want to do is speak a little bit about the motivations to poach as well, which is an indirect way of examining why others think people do decide to poach or not. So in this case, my animations are off, so I apologize in advance. But when we go one step further, when we look at the norms, there's information or research out there that tells us that if there's a poacher in the middle, in this case, this is a poacher who is poaching black bears in the United States, the research suggests that he's more likely to be influenced by the perceptions or the norms of his family and friends compared to others that he might know. And again, compared to the general fishing public. So when we think about the power of norms, it's not just a one-off thing. They're operating on multiple scales or levels. So what we found was that nearly all fishers thought that poaching was not personally acceptable, which is great. But we also did see that the perceived social acceptability of poaching increased with social distance. So the further away it got from somebody that we knew, the more likely fishers were to assume that poaching was acceptable with those other groups. We also found that fishers did think it was likely that other fishers had poached in the last year. And so this really suggests that there's something called pluralistic ignorance that may be operative. And pluralistic ignorance is this phenomenon, the psychological phenomenon, where, and they originally demonstrated it in studies of binge drinking in college students, where college students really didn't binge drink, but they thought that everyone else binge drank. And so what happened here is when these perceptions weren't corrected, they actually changed their behavior and started binge drinking to fit in with this misperceived norm. So the same may apply in illegal fishing. If we personally don't fish illegally, but we think everyone else fishes illegally, there's a chance that we may change our own behavior to poach or to fish illegally to fit in with this misperceived norm. So when it comes to management, one of the things is providing really good information on these norms and what the level is within the society. When we looked at our attitudes towards management, we did find very high perceptions of legitimacy, but we also found that roughly 10% of fishers had either some level of distrust, a lack of identification, or perceptions of injustice. And we also found a moderate level of fishers who don't think they have a fair and equal share of the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park. And the interesting thing here is that perceptions of management are actually demonstrably important for compliance behaviors, which I'll tell you a little bit more about. When we looked at our outcome beliefs, or what would happen if somebody was fishing in a green zone, or a no-take zone in this case, most fishers accepted the rationale that no-takes do produce, or no-take zones produce bigger and more fish. But there is a moderate level of disbelievers about reserve effects and environmental consequences of poaching. We did find that most people did think poaching would result in a fine, but the problem here is that we didn't actually measure the perceived risk of being detected or getting caught. We found very high levels of awareness again, but many apprehended poachers on the Great Barrier Reef do use ignorance as an excuse. Lastly, we found a moderate level of fishers who would not be deterred by fines, gear confiscation, or social shame. So ideally, these fishers that aren't deterred by these things are driven more by personal or moral norms. But alternatively, they may not perceive a high risk of detection while poaching. I know I have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to try to cruise through this last bit that I have for you. Is we really want to know what the perceived motivations to poach were. And we need to understand why people poach, but we also know that asking people is unlikely to produce honest answers. So one solution to this was to indirectly investigate the reasons for fishers to poach. So asking people, why do you think others do it? And in this case, it's because perceptions of other people's behaviors have previously been used to investigate illicit behavior. And because it allows us to put this kind of shade or this screen of impartiality in front of our own face or our own kind of sensitivity to the question and project our beliefs onto others. And so when we looked at this, we found that fishers on the Great Barrier Reef thought that poaching was really opportunity-based rather than an act of protest or rebellion. They thought it was because there was better fishing in reserves and a low risk of detection. And this suggests to us that something that we call the information deficit communication model, apologies for the mouthful, is unlikely to curb poaching activities. And this model is basically this. We assume that people are poaching in marine reserves because they don't understand that marine reserves work. And oftentimes with managers or practitioners, the idea is, well, we just need to tell people more. We need to make more information available to them. And they'll understand that they're working and then they'll magically follow the rules. However, this does not often occur. So this is a common thing that you come across in conservation and environmental management in general, but it's been disproven time and time again. And so when you look at the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park and some of the signs that they're putting out, the first thing that pops out at you is that there's more and bigger fish in no-take zones. But the problem is when this is linked with a low perceived risk of being caught, it could actually be increasing or perversely encouraging non-compliance. So in summary, we found very overall high levels of perceived legitimacy, some level of distrust or injustice in management. We found that this concept of pluralistic ignorance may be contributing to the continuation of poaching, and that poaching may actually be opportunity-based with the idea that there's more fish and a perceived low risk of detection compared to anything else. And with that, since I'm out of time, I will end there, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brock, for your very broad and detailed explanation on this blinker term of conservation and sustainable use of ocean depend for human behavior. I hope you all enjoy this amazing presentation. Yeah. And very well, everyone. Now we come to question and answer session. If you have the question, you can type in the chat box in the Zoom. And if you want to present your question, you can raise hand, click raise hand feature.
And the crickets come out. Hopefully I wasn't speaking too fast. Anyway, I had a very short window, so I apologize ahead of time if I was mumbling or rushing through somewhat complex ideas.
Okay, we will wait for the question for the attendance, but it's very interesting topic for me. But I wonder something about connection between human behavior and fisheries, like fisheries product, because I'm from aquatic product. So what do you think about the what is that? Can you tell me a bit about how social and economic research fit into the fisheries product and monitoring the program?
Yeah, so what I didn't really get to cover today was another study that we did where we were actually looking at reporting of non-compliance in different marine protected areas around the world. So not just looking at the recreational fishing problem. I think when you get to this socioeconomic thing, you think more and more about fisheries where people are dependent on quota for their livelihood, then it's a whole different ballgame. To some extent, it's maybe a little bit easier to understand from a research perspective because it's pretty clear if you're trying to survive, you're going to do whatever you need to do. So from a research aspect, it's quite easy to understand, but from a management aspect, it's quite complicated. It's in some cases immoral to tell somebody you can't fish here because because this is a new marine protected area, you have to go elsewhere. So that really brings into focus the need to consider larger things like poverty alleviation and access to health resources and all these other types of things that may influence noncompliance, but indirectly or from a distal driver perspective. And yes, please do. I'm looking at the chat box. Lukey, please do give a question and comment.
Yeah. Thank you for the
Thank you.
answer. And for Dr. Lucky Adrianto, yeah,
Okay,
can you open the camera?
I already opened my camera.
Okay.
Did you see my
Okay.
face?
Yeah. Okay.
Baik, thank you, Dr. Brooks. Halo Naomi, how are you doing?
Very good. Hello, Pak Loki.
Ya, baik-baik ya.
Yeah.
Baik, thank you, Dr. Brooks. Actually, I just want to use this opportunity during this discussion. I think I gave you comments and question. Comment is that the first is that the behavior of the human behavior regarding to the marine conservation is very important. As I understand that managing fisheries is actually managing people, managing resources is actually managing the people. Even though that we also understand that ecological feature is also very important, but when we talk about resource management, then we have to talk about the how to manage the people. And when we talk about how to manage the people, then we have to understand the drivers, everything regarding to the behaviors, especially the perceived values of the people. And this issues actually already been started quite strong, broke in the context of Indonesian marine conservation. As you know that maybe here Pak Hawis, Mas Bekin will also discuss about that the spectrums of marine conservation also now changing from orthodox conservationism within that actually human is not part of ecosystem, for example, to the now we call more participatory marine conservation, or even though now we discuss about the marine protected area for fisheries. So meaning that the conservation mechanism, the conservation regimes, especially with the marine context, then we have to talk about the people surrounding the marine area, or conservation area, or something like that. So I think thank you for your presentation today. That we this make us more confidence that actually the human is part of the ecosystem. Why I said that before I go to the question, maybe Naomi has introduced me to you that I now lead what we call the socio-ecological system of the Ocean Laboratory. I'm socioeconomics by education, and now we deal with the socio-ecological system approach for coastal and marine resource management, including fisheries management. And regarding to the fisheries behavior, now we have a research collaboration with Oxford University. Maybe you know the Naomi with the Holy Boat, one of the PhD students. Maybe Pak Brok, you know her. He's under Professor AJ from the Center for Biodiversity in Oxford, and we now in collaboration in how to understand the fishers shark fishers behaviors, because when we talk about the shark conservation, mainly seen from the context of biodiversity perspective, but now we try to understand more why they still catch the shark, for example, in the context of some hotspot in Tanjung Luar, for example, in Indonesia, or in Aceh, in Lombok, something like that. So that's the thing that actually your talks is very, very interesting and very important for us, since that actually we have diverse of the culture, the diverse of the socio-economics characteristic of the fishers, for example, start from Sabang to Merauke. So that's why that in IPB University actually this human human dimension is very important in dealing with the marine conservation area. That's the comment. Sorry for a bit long to just introduce our concern too. That's similar with you. The second one is that about the question. I believe that actually one of the thing that you mentioned about the actor based and area based, the approach of these studies, and if I'm not mistaken, your slide, I don't know actually, maybe correct me if I'm wrong. I try to say that maybe a hybrid approach of area and actor based will be perhaps will be more operational level in context of Indonesia. For example, if you know that Naomi has known very well that, say, for example, on fisheries management, we also discuss about the area-based fisheries management, like fisheries management area. Within fisheries management area, there are many of actor or stakeholders. Within fisheries management area, there is a marine conservation area, and within the marine conservation area, there is also actor, something like so. What do you think? Is it possible to combine between the area and actor-based approach in studying about the fishers, especially the fishers' behavior in the context of conservation? That's my question, just to make sure about that approach. Thank you, Brooke.
Yeah, I'm getting a little bit of feedback, so hopefully it's not coming through for everyone. But I think absolutely nesting the actor-based approach within the larger context of place-based approach will really get you somewhere. And I understand in Indonesia you have 11 different kind of territorial regions where fisheries are managed, and it's I tried to get my head around Indonesian fisheries management for quite some time, and it was quite difficult to understand. So yeah, I mean, context specific certainly always happens, but I think working with Oxford and working with that center, you guys have aligned yourself very well with some very much leading researchers in that field, and figuring out how you take something like an actor-based survey or an actor-based approach and scale it across those areas, I think will lead to some really incredible research findings. So if I can help out in any ways, please do let me know. I didn't get to speak about my future research directions, but I'm very much interested in how we use behavioral interventions to influence fisher behavior. So either way, I wish you the best of luck, and I really do look forward to seeing some of the findings that come out of the work you guys are doing.
Thank you, Brooke. Let's keeping in touch ya. Selamat buat teman-teman International Collaboration Office, Mas siapa nih? Ada Mas Iskandar ya, dan teman-teman ya, atas. Oh, Mas Dase, oh sorry.
Terima kasih.
Congratulations Mas Dase, terima kasih ya. Selamat Mas Dase, luar biasa. Jadi ini perikanan keberapa ini? Rasanya baru keberapa ya Mas Begin? Banyak nih.
62 ya.
Jadi,
thank you also to Pak Begin. It is very direct to Dr. Brooke. Thank you so much as well for the time, although it's very short notice, but we try to take this opportunity. Perhaps there will be collaborations between those faculty of marine science in IPB and also GCU, as we have also a good collaborations, and that's why it can be more strengthened, the collaborations between the researcher. And that's why we have another talk later with Pak Begin, but before it also Pak Hawis perhaps want to ask something or say something. Dr. Hawis?
Yes, thank you very much. That's it. Yeah, well, I'm glad to meet you here, Dr. Brooke. So enjoying your talk today. So I'm actually working with the small scale fisheries in Indonesia, and then it's very complex, related to some regulations from Indonesian sides. Also, some small scale fisheries is not targeted to the domestic market, but it is targeted to export market. So by answering this, actually, it is always difficult to see the changing of human behavior related to, for example, how they change the use of fishing gear, or how to make them to swap the gear to environmentally friendly. So by seeing your presentations, actually really interesting to see how to see the impact, or how to see the changing behavior from time to time. We actually have like biological data to see how they react to the regulations, not seeing the human itself, but seeing the biological data. How, for example, they are banned to fishing the undersize also the buried female. I know that Australia also has a blue swimming crab, but the other species. So now we are actually working on that to see the changing behavior, because it is actually to fulfill the requirement for the indicators, the Marine Stewardship Council. So because there are some indicators like to see the stock status, the impact to environmental, and then the effective of management. So this is all actually related to human. So I agree with Pak Luki that this is managing fisheries, actually managing people. But to react, sometimes it's difficult to interview the human, because as you mentioned that it is actually difficult to grab their idea about something they already know. For example, it is prohibit to catch undersize, but they will not honest to us that they catch that. So to see this, I actually like seeing the behavior by seeing the biological structure, because for now I already have like 5-year stock assessment, so I can see the changing of behavior. But it is really interesting to match what you have presented here. Probably you have a comment on this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. That's super interesting that you're able to use the biological proxies to get an idea of human behavior. And I think that that's probably where I started. Was I actually started looking at fish behavior is when I started out, and looking at changes in fish behavior and figuring out if that was indicative of human fishing pressures. So I think there's plenty of scope to be able to expand and try to do some of the social surveys around the research you're doing. I understand that it's incredibly complex as well. When it comes to influencing behaviors, I was just reading an article in Behavioral Scientist probably 2 weeks ago that was written by the group RARE, which I know works a little bit in Indonesia. And they were talking about, how they're basically thinking about social dynamics and coming in with an idea. And in this case, they were talking about sustainable agricultural practices. And they would get a little bit of social proof. So they'd find this early adopter or someone in the community that had a bit of sway or was at least on board with making these changes in this case, maybe in changing fishing gears. And then they highlighted how this person was doing it to take it out and to use social influence more largely in the entire community or in the larger regional area. And once they got that going and they got a little bit of a snowball effect happening, then they were able to take that and use that social influence and leverage it to social pressure, to basically getting at these social acceptability norms, and basically saying, did you know, most of the people here don't, approve of using an illegal fishing gear or whatever else. But so obviously these are really complex kind of long run efforts. So when we move into that, and when when we think about influencing behavior, it's not something that happens overnight. So having 5 years of data like the stuff that you're working on, and this really, really tailored knowledge about the specific communities that you're in, I think sets you up really quite well to expand into the social side if you do go that direction.
Okay, thank you for answer, Dr. Brock. I believe the question from Dr. Hawis has been answered. Sorry. So we have one other question here from Sihar Silalahi. The question is, so the border between every choice they choose from strongly disagree to slightly disagree, for example, is really subjective based on their own perception, but how far they moderate disagree or slightly disagree? Are there any certain indicator to help them to decide whether they are just slightly disagree or moderate disagree? Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, the idea of using scales and getting people to answer on numbers is always tricky. And so I know in some cases where they've adapted the use of the scales to something that perhaps is used in elementary school. If people are always using the same scales to speak about something, they'll use something that's more familiar. And it's obviously incredibly subjective. over time, I think if you're doing it at a community level, and in our case, we weren't just trying to look at one person's perception and tie that directly to their behavior. We were trying to look more at like a community level thing. We kind of dealt with some of that potential noise or bias that exists. In this case, the thing that I definitely want to make a nod to is I presented you with a bunch of quantitative data, but we did a lot of qualitative data during the initial stages of our research to inform the quantitative questions. We asked a lot of open-ended questions that kind of directed us to the quantitative stuff. And I know a lot of people, you know, and in the circles that I run in, some people are, I'm a quantitative social scientist, or I'm a qualitative social scientist. And I think the challenge perhaps is to look more beyond the tools and more to the questions that you're asking and use the right tools to do so, which is what I endeavor to do whenever possible.
Okay. Yeah, I believe too, the question from Sihar Silalahi has been answered. And I think, what is that? Okay. Any question, everyone?
I'm just looking in the chat box.
Yeah, from Iman.
Yes, I think Mbak Moderator, Iman and Pak Handoko is here. He's also part of the rare effort regarding to the species behavior in the Southeast Sulawesi. I think if the time still available, maybe 1-2 minutes for them to give some experience in Southeast Sulawesi.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Imam.
Timanda, you explain more.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Hi again, Dr. Brock. My name is Iman, and I'm here alongside Handoko. He used to also work with me at RARE. Now I'm currently working on community behavior change in Southeast Sulawesi. Now we have about 22 sites across Sulawesi province. And the thing is, our theory of change revolves around how we can create a norm, just like you said, to create a norm and create a pressure, a social pressure to create that sense of stewardship from the community. But from our experience so far, I don't know if Mr. Handoko can also add some insight. We notice some things that are unique. For example, the communities tend to agree to norms that are created by the leaders. For example, if the leaders from provincial or from district officials, if they can lead by examples, the community tend to believe them more. So it's not just creating from the community, the grassroots, bottom up, but also the top down approach is also effective from our perspectives. And from our experience, we are also seeing that some of the communities, if they have 1 or 2 local leaders, we call them champions. They are also being the examples that we want to see. So there's 1 and 2% leading them. It would be like an example to other communities as well. So I think that's some of the examples that I can give. Maybe Mr. Pak Handoko, if you want to add more from your experience.
That sounds great. So you must be working with Stu Campbell at RARE, right? I think Stu's
Yeah. I'm working alongside him. Yes.
Yeah, I know Stu. He's a good guy. So I hope to actually team up with you guys at some point in the future. So maybe if COVID settles down, I can come over for a visit and learn a bit more.
Yeah, we're more than happy to help. Sure.
I'm also offering to collaborate with us, bro, to work or study in Indonesia. To a lot of complexities in Indonesia. I think it's better to challenging to understand the human behaviors in marine resource management. Welcome to Indonesia then, yeah, right?
Sounds good to me.
Yep. So I think that's all the question that we have from the attendance question, because the time is over. And everyone, finally, we came to the end presentation from the first speaker. We would like to say thank you very much from Dr. Brock for informative and interesting talk, and to the attendees for your active participation. Okay, let's move to the next agenda. Before that, I got information from the community ICIPB that Dr. Brock would not follow us for the webinar until the end because he had other agenda. So, Dr. Brock, if you want to leave this Zoom room, place is yours.
I'll stick around for a little bit more, but I do need to pack. I go on the field tomorrow and I haven't even started. So classic stitch up. Thanks for your patience.
And now we are moving to the second speaker, Dr. Begin from IPB University, with the title Marine Protected Area in Indonesia. But before that, also I would like to read and introduce to you who is Dr. Begin. I got the information from the internet too. So Dr. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Dr. Begin is a staff in IPB University with a functional status as doctor. He now the current of lecturer in the Science and Marine Technology Department, IPB University. He also interested in some fields such as coral reef restoration, marine biology, marine bioprospection, marine biodiversity, and scientific diving. So without further ado, Dr. Begin, time is yours.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. We already saw the presentation from Pak Brook about the human behavior, but I will not talk a lot. I will not talk about human behavior here, but in my area about the marine biodiversity in marine protected area in Indonesia. And I want to say hi to Pak Luki, Pak Dasa, and all the colleagues here who still on the room, still in the room for to see the presentation. And for this opportunity, I will present about the marine protected area in Indonesia. Especially, I will present some our works with Dr. Awis Madupa about the environmental DNA next generation biomonitoring to discover biodiversity in MPA. We will present some our research in some marine protected area in Indonesia. Why we need MPA? So as we know, the MPA is a protected area managed by a zoning system, and especially in Indonesia, mostly we do for the manage the fish resource and their environment. And nowadays, the condition of marine protected area, mostly marine protected area in Indonesia is related to coral reefs area. And Indonesia, coral reefs ecosystem have undergone rapidly and widespread changes because of the several threats and several and then because of the human factors. And overfishing and pollution is known as the biggest threat for the coral reef of Indonesia. In about 93% threatened for the area, including in the marine protected area. And this is some level of marine protected area in general. So first is a multiple use, so allows extractive uses like fishing, and with some restriction, and no take zone. So MPA not allowed the extract or use the area, and we call marine reserves. And no impact is allow people to extract, yeah. And no access is this restriction, and very rare and only for the research purpose, and the people can access the area. And what is the type of marine protected area in Indonesia? So as Pak Lucky mentioned, yeah, in Indonesia is several changes, yeah, about the definition and type of marine protected area, because of Indonesia is in the management and the policy. They several changes also, and then they make looks like more quite complicated, yeah, in Indonesia. So it's several terms about the marine protected area. It's a coastal and small islands conservation area, and there's a two type, yeah, sanctuary and park. And second is a maritime conservation area, and also marine conservation area. And the difference between the type is the availability of the zone inside the conservation area. So in the coastal and small island conservation area and maritime conservation area, they can name it three zone, yeah, core zone, utilization zone, and other zones. And for the conservation area, they put sustainable fisheries zone. So this is the difference in marine protected area in type of Indonesia. And actually, marine protected area in Indonesia is conducted in by several actors. Yeah, in government, we know the Ministry of Forestry and Environment. They have national park, yeah, marine national park, and also Ministry of Marine and Fisheries Affairs. They manage the marine protected area also. And then, as we know, a long time ago, it's already the practice of the marine protected area was conducted by the traditional people. We know, we heard about Sasi, yeah, in some part in Maluku. They manage the area as a some Sasi is like protected area, but temporarily. So they manage in some some duration of time to protect the area, and until they can harvest some resources like fish or invertebrates, yeah, like mollusks, crustacean, and echinoderms, and etc. So actually, the practice of the marine protected area is been a long time ago in Indonesia, and can reach the target of area in how big the marine protected area in Indonesia. Now in situation is about 23.14 million hectare, and then as target, yeah, in 2030 is 22.5 million hectare. So this is quite challenging and quite big in Indonesia. And as we know, in Indonesia, the marine protected area is widely spread, yeah, from the Aceh to Papua, and then from the north, yeah, Sangihe, and until the Rote. So this is quite challenging to manage the marine protected area in Indonesia, and then it's quite a lot and separate the area. So it's about now we into 2019, yeah, we have about 197 marine protected area that managed by Ministry of Marine Affairs and also Ministry of Forestry and Environment, and some area also related to the local government under the province management. So this is a challenging, how to see the impact of the marine protected area to increase the resources, such as the marine biodiversity, and also to support the economy, support the economy in the area. So in here, in my presentation, in our concern is about the how to know about the effect of the marine protected area on the marine biodiversity in MPA, and how to monitor it. So as we see here, the area is quite huge and separate, and we need to tools, to help the government to understand the marine biodiversity in MPA and the impact of the protected zone, protected area to marine biodiversity. So in our study, we propose the environmental DNA as the next generation by monitoring. Why we need the environmental DNA? We can use the environmental DNA for the biodiversity assessment in marine protected area, especially in coral reefs. As we know, it's not only fish, species, and corals. There's a million of the species inside the marine protected area. Nowadays, we only mostly we focus only fish and corals and some crustacean and others animals and others biota. But actually, the value of marine biodiversity is more than that biota. And then in the next generation, we also know about the invasive species, and there's a camp from another country on also introduced species that we can monitor the invasive species in several areas. And sometimes in marine protected area, like in Seribu Islands, or in Java or some part of Indonesia, they have a platform, like here for the oil and gas, and then the area is we cannot enter the area for diving or just or like doing like a visual census. So we can conduct the activity, and it means we cannot get the data, and that's why the environmental DNA we can use in several area that restricted for the diving or underwater activity. And also the monitoring the new area for the restoration. We heard in Indonesia some part of marine protected area they they involve some restoration project. Mostly they like they put the restoration project inside the marine protected area, as a pilot project, and we can assess how fast the biodiversity in the restoration area. And this is the most one of the important things, how to answer the connection between MPA, how the effect such as a spillover can we detect from as the result of the successful of marine protected area. As we know, some species have migration or some from the species only move about 1 kilometer, but some species like shark and big fish, they can go miles away, and sometimes they go to from one area, protected area, to another protected area, and so we cannot with the conventional monitoring, we cannot detect the network and where the species came from. There is a connection between the MPA, and if we use the environmental DNA as a next gen biomonitoring, it could be we can see the connection between the MPA. And the first important thing is the biodiversity status, especially for the early detection. So what species already gone, or and then what the status of the species in the area. So we can see from the result of biomonitoring. And as we know,
sorry, I'm sorry, doctor.
Yes.
We have we have 2 minutes again.
Okay, and this is the why we need the biomonitoring, because we see in Indonesia there's a lot of shipping activity, and then it's probably bring the invasive species to the marine protected area. This is we want to propose the environmental DNA. So just especially referring the native and invasive species. So this is our research in Seribu Islands. So we collect the sample and then go to the lab, and as the result, so we not only find fish, but also several others biota, so we can detect them. And then the more information we can get the introduced and native species, so and also the introduced invasive species, and probably from others countries. So this is the use of the environmental DNA. And also in Banda, we also do the environmental DNA, and then we can see the we can see a lot of information besides fish and corals in that area. So this is the biomonitoring in several more protected area in Pulau Seribu, and then Wakatobi, and also Banda, and we also detect the marine biodiversity, like fish, in this is shark and rays. We can easily understand what kind of species in that area, and then how they connect each other. and this is biomonitoring for so we can get lot more information, yeah, if we use the marine environmental DNA. Okay, I just got through, yeah. And another research about the gut content, yeah. You can see what kind of food of the fish, yeah, and we can use for the information for the manage the fish, yeah. So I just through the highlights. So from our research, Eastern Indonesian Satra Jambat is important, yeah, and unique diversity. So they need to protect, and DNA barcoding and environmental metabarcoding provide valuable complementary baseline biodiversity information. So combination, yeah, method is therefore recommended to similar studies in understudied high biodiversity area and high anthropogenic pressure. So benefit of environmental DNA, more sampling and cover area, and then detect endangered and threatened species, reduce sampling time and cost, estimating abundance and distribution, finding hidden and rare organism, and also ecosystem health, and more species found in the community, and can monitoring total biodiversity. And future works, we should improve, yeah, to assign more accurate taxonomy, looking further beneficent absent of group other than just abundance data, and more collection to compare abundance at different time point. Need to investigate further connection between population facilitated by fishing activities or ocean, and comparing ADNR results with fisheries and underwater visual census data. And the last one is MPA design should consider the dynamic of marine organism. Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Begin, for your very broad and detailed explanation on this blanket term of marine protected Indonesia. Yeah, as we know, Indonesia is marine biodiversity, and yeah, it's very range of habitats, including the open ocean, coastal areas, and others. And don't forget, I will remind you, don't forget to fill the attendance and on the link provided in the chat box. And very well, everyone. Now we came to question and answer session. If you have a question, you can type in the book chat. And if you have the present question, you can click raise hand feature. Yeah, we have okay. Sorry. Okay, we have a question from Mr. Ibrahim Bambang. When does the protection?
The first is from
sorry?
Sam. What Hosens perhaps may open from
yeah,
Sam.
Okay. Yeah. The first question from Sam. From Sam, the previous Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Fisheries target that by 2020 an area of 20 million MPA would be established. Has this target been achieved? How effective is those MPA in protecting the existing marine resources in the MPA? Is there an example of the success story of the MPA in Indonesia? Can you also give the true example of result of monitoring? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Pak Prof. Sam Watuzen, ya, from LIPI nih, our senior in LIPI. And yeah, actually in as a target, yeah, in 20 million hectare. It's as I mentioned, it's already probably it's already reached the target, yeah, for the marine protected area. So it's about 20 something, and this is also our questions, yeah, about the MPA. Is those MPA protecting effective, yeah, to protect the marine resource in MPA. So for the answer these questions, yeah, based on my experience and information, yeah, about the some area, some marine protected area is a success to achieve the especially not only target the biodiversity but also the economy and change the behavior, yeah, some area such as when I discuss with people who work in Nusa Penida, Bali, yeah, they claim about they have a success story about how they change the little bit the behavior of the fishermen there, about the how to utilize the marine resources, yeah, in Nusa Penida. And then some parts such as in Raja Ampat, yeah, Raja Ampat also we learn a lot of things, yeah, in a lot of practice, yeah, in Raja Ampat, yeah. Some how they start MPA and then establish the MPA, and now they're still under process to make the better MPA. And then and also we have a big project, yeah, like Cormap. Cormap is a big project in all over Indonesia. LIPI, one of the implementer, the Cormap, yeah, as the result of biomonitoring there based on fish and corals, and also others ecosystem, yeah, like mangrove and seagrass, yeah. Some parts area is the corals are coral covers, yeah, coral cover are increased because of the in the protected area, but some parts is decline. So, but the fact the condition of protected area is not only as the mentioned, yeah, the threat is on not only human, yeah, but also the global condition, yeah, the global climate, yeah. So sometimes because of the bleaching event in 2000 and 2010, 2015, yeah, if I'm not wrong, some part of corals, some part area, yeah, in MPA, the corals cover is decreased. So as I mentioned in earlier, because manage the MPA in Indonesia is quite complicated. So many actors. So biomonitoring is one of the tools to see how effective marine protected area, because the goal of marine protected area is for sustainability, and sustainability not only sustainability of the ecosystem, and also the human livelihood, to support the human livelihood. That's why the MPA is like transdisciplinary, should be in a transdisciplinary approach, yeah. Not only biological aspects, also human behavior, and also the policy inside the area. And for the biomonitoring, yeah, I already mentioned, yeah, biomonitoring in MPA, such as in I saw the last publication, yeah, in from Raja Ampat, yeah. They have a results quite good, yeah. Area with no take zone and with open access is quite different, yeah. We also have a result in Raja Ampat, yeah. We found that the fish biomass in no take zone, yeah, or tourism zone, yeah, is higher than open access zone. So this is good, I think, hope, yeah, good hope for us. The protected area is quite useful tools for Indonesian coral reefs. I think that's my answer.
All right.
Thank you very much, Pak Begin.
Pak Sam, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Long time no see.
Yeah, long time not see you. A long time is.
Okay. I believe the question from Professor Sam has been answered too. So we have other question from Mr. Ibrahim Bambang. I have general question about MPA in Indonesia. When does the protection begin in stage of MPA establishment, and what exactly does it mean? This relate to research of MPA's impact on biodiversity that when it should take place. Yeah, Dr. Begin.
Yeah, it's I think this is the hard to answer, yeah. For when the MPA established, yeah. So as I mentioned, the MPA protected area is should be first we should declare, yeah, where how big the area, and then for the what is the mean we can protect the area, so we can actually we can manage the area, yeah. We can manage the area as a function, yeah. If we have the core zone, and also sustainable fishery zone, and then tourism zone. So first we should establish the zones, yeah. So if we already all the stakeholders agree in that area about the zones, and then they know, they knew and understand what the value of the zone and what the function of the zone. It's I think that's the new beginning, yeah, of the MPA establishment. And for the long goal of the MPA, as I mentioned earlier, is how to as the goal is how to we manage the sustainable the biodiversity in marine protected area, and then can help people around the marine protected area or inside the marine protected area to increase their livelihood and prosperity. So that's but the challenge in since we working in human behavior, and the challenge is if we already established, so it would be another challenge, and I think the establishment really established is will not achieve, because the challenge will come and come again. That's why study about the marine protected area is still continue, especially the human behavior, and the human behavior will affect the biodiversity. So that's my answer for the question. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer, Doctor, and thank you for our last question from Mr. Ibrahim. And so I think that's all the question. Everyone, finally we came to the end of the presentation. We would like to say thank again for Dr. Begin for your informative and interesting talk, and to the audience for your active participation. Hopefully the presentation will be beneficial for everybody. And last but not least, I'll bring you some conclusion from today's webinar. Marine protected areas are particularly important because can improve biodiversity and the ecological health of the areas. And it is in everyone's best interest that we should let population recover and allow for sustainable ocean for the future. And I have information about the next webinar, especially actually tomorrow, with the topic higher education system in Kenya and opportunities for collaboration. We have two speakers. There are Professor Dr. Arif Satria as a rector IPB University, and Dr. Muhammad Heri as an ambassador of the Republic Indonesia in Nairobi. If you're interested with this topic, you can registration with the link provided in the chat box, or you can visit in ICO Instagram. So I'm Reza Helena Muslifa, and as the moderator, and also on behalf of all communities of IPBTalk 62 today, we beg your pardon and we apologize for the mistake. And thank you very much. And once again, our speaker for your time, and every attendant for coming. And I wish you have a good day, afternoon or night. Wherever you are, stay healthy, and thank you so much, and see you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you IPB, thank you IPB.
Pak Luki, Naomi.
Thank you, congratulations Mas Begin, thank you very much.
Mas Suryo, teman-teman.
Ada Mas Suryo ya? Oh.
Ada.
Ada seniornya Mas Begin.
Senior nih, Dai Senpai nih. Mbak Ade. Nah, Mbak Ade juga, Pak.
Mana Mbak Ade?
Semoga besok-besok bisa kerja sama lagi ya IPB.
Iya.
Oh yes, thank you Mas Arif.
Ya Pak. Sama Pak. Sampai ketemu lagi. Keep in touch.
Begin, great talk. Congrats ya.
Izin live.
Ya.
Itu Mbak Tries, Ade suruh ngomong di Sustainability Talk tuh.
Iya Pak. Ini Pak Dase nih.
Pak Dase boleh ya? Series gitu 2 bulan sekali perikanan ke lautan gitu Mas Dase.
Siap.
Nanti kita usulkan lah ke Ico ya Pak Luki ya. Kita bikin.
Baik, nanti kita sama-sama usulkan.